don't think so.
Do you not think that like the actions taken, and by the way, later on, the Supreme Court ruled that what FDR did was wrong.
Sure.
Right? So,
but even if he was wrong, that means he's criminally liable.
Okay. So you don't think the president would be criminally liable for putting through an unconstitutional executive order that puts people in concentration camps?
No.
Why not? You don't. So just to get this cleared up, if the president put through an executive order, like Donald Trump just decides to drone strike Joe Biden for whatever reason, if he puts through that executive order, he can't be criminally held responsible for that, right?
Well, according to the current Supreme Court, he can't.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But I think he should be. Because I would argue in that role, unless he had intelligence or something saying otherwise, right? It seems like he's just like paying somebody, or he's carrying like a hit, he's murdering somebody.
Yeah.
Now, for instance, if it was the case privately that we find out, that for Dick and Terminus, whatever, where he, he's like, oh, there's like this 300 Asian guys I fucking hate, and I'm gonna do this like the tournament campaign because I hate these motherfuckers because they beat me in
So there has to be like some level of intent to it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, intention is a huge. It's half the criminal thing, right? The act is created and then
so
right?
If Trump just goes through and does something that can't be deemed as intention, because you can't necessarily be in the president's head at all times.
No, we are absolutely in people's heads. That's how we charge every crime.
Okay, but that's what I'm saying. Like, if it comes down to intention, right? And we know the intention of like certain people like FDR or people were to like respond negatively to these groups of people. Like,
for what reason though? Personally, because he thought it was in the best interest of the country. Because you would have to make an argument that he's like personally trying to kidnap and detain people because he personally hates them or whatever, right? But if he's clearly acting in his role as president, then that seems really hard. I don't know what crime you would charge him with. But for Donald Trump, it's very obvious that he wasn't acting in any of his roles as president. Half the fucking shit that was happening was his own personal goonies. Fucking Giuliani, Sidney Powell, these weren't even members of the White House or anything, right? He's very clearly not acting in his capacity as president, and all of the orders that he's issuing, he's telling people to lie and stuff for his own personal gain. These aren't presidential actions that he's doing maybe improperly. These are criminal actions he's doing personally for personal gain.
Yeah, but I'm saying like these things have been like ruled in like future rulings to be like criminal, basically, and like
no, they're not ruled criminal. If a thing is made illegal, you can't do a thing that doesn't make it criminal. A criminal thing is like there are criminal statutes made up. Criminal statutes mean that you can be charged with a crime where you kind of a deprivation of rights and everything. They're not procedural civil things where people can be sued for money or you get an improper advertisement or censure or whatever. But like,
I guess I'm just like highlighting the fact that like the president has gone about multiple things in like kind of unconstitutional ways or ways that the Supreme Court has deemed.
Sure, but unconstitutional doesn't mean criminal.
Well, what I'm highlighting here is like the president goes about unconstitutional things, and a lot of the things that happened during the J6 stuff, you would argue are unconstitutional, right? Like the whole ignoring the Electoral Count Act, right? Like these are things that violate.
I wouldn't say that was unconstitutional. I would say he was breaking the law.
Why would he be breaking the law?
Because he was criminally breaking. Because the ECA was a law, and he was telling people to break it.
Okay.
So it's conspiracy, to break the law. So it's actually breaking. Well, they didn't actually, I guess, because Pence didn't, but.
Okay, but so I know the big issue with the break of the Electoral Count Act is the fact that the votes were divvied up to Mike Pence at the end, and he was supposed to like throw them out or send them back to the House, right? That's just
kind of. It's just how you count the electoral votes, yeah.
Yeah. So if that's kind of the case, right? Why did Democrats go and push through legislation to basically, like it was something illegal? Why did they put in legislation to make it illegal after it happened?
I don't know, it's stupid they shouldn't have, because these stupid arguments are used. Because Donald Trump knew he was breaking the law. It's in every single email that Eastman and Chesborough are sending out. They know that they're breaking the law. Every time you hear a conservative...
I know, but like if the Democrats push through legislation like this, it clearly shows that even in their estimates, like he wasn't breaking the law. It was an ambiguous law, right? With like the way
it wasn't ambiguous. That's why they knew they were breaking it.
Yeah, but I'm saying you can say that, but like why did Democrats then go?
Because they wanted to tighten up the language a little bit, but they didn't need to, but they thought they could. But
so we just think like the entire Democratic House and Senate just thought they needed to tighten up language on a bill.
Yeah,
there was no like you get an entire like mass of Democratic, but like I just find it hard to believe. Like you get a whole mass.
You can find that hard to believe, but like Donald Trump and all of his people. All of them said they were going to be breaking the law. They all acknowledged they were breaking the law. Pence was under the impression they were breaking the law. That's why he said no. Barr quit over Trump asking to break. Every single person in their circle all acknowledged that they would be departing from the ECA, and their claim was that it was unconstitutional, which is code word for them for breaking the law. All of them said that's what they were going to do, and they very clearly, like, I know the Democrats appended like 2 sentences or whatever stupid shit because they thought it made it more rock solid, but like he would break it the same way as it is now. He would have done the same thing. Like he was clear, you acknowledge that they said that we were going to break the law because we think it's unconstitutional.
I mean, he may have said that multiple times.
Okay, so then they thought he was breaking the law, right?
So, but if you think you're breaking the law, like, does that magically make it that there's a law in place that you're breaking?
Yes. Like, for instance, if an FBI officer tells me that he's selling me some weed, and I go, oh yeah, I'm gonna buy that weed, but it's not real weed, I'm still breaking the law because I'm trying to buy illicit drugs, I'm trying to buy narcotics.
Okay, I get what you're saying there, but you understand what I'm saying. Like, if you think that freedom of speech is breaking the law for whatever reason in your head, and then you go and you commit an act, right, that violates that law, that freedom of speech doesn't exist. Then
You're saying he thinks he's breaking the law, but you're not actually breaking the law?
Yeah.
Then theoretically, I mean, if it was adjudicated as such, then you could say, then fine, that he wasn't breaking the law, but even his own people, what was the name of the guy? It wasn't Chesbrough, it was the guy who literally said that if we went to the Supreme Court, I think Rosen was arguing this guy, if he went to the Supreme Court, you know that he would lose on this. I think it might have been Eastman. And initially Eastman was like, well, yeah, we'd probably lose like 2-7, and they were like, oh yeah, we'd probably lose 9-0. But the idea was that once Trump was in office, there's no way the Supreme Court is going to unseat the president, because he said that they would kick it back because of the political questions and the major questions out there. So that's like a whole ass scheme to break a law, know the Supreme Court won't probably overturn it because it's too big of a question, and then to carry on like ordinary business. Like, it doesn't get much more clear from that, I think, from start to finish of what the goal was. And if you read the ECA, like, they clearly wanted to depart from what the ECA says.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Tristan?
I guess, like, can I briefly touch on manufacturing?
Yeah.
Okay, do you want to?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, do you find it troubling that the President of the United States could now order a hit on a U.S. citizen, and the Supreme Court has said that he could never be charged with a crime for that?
I mean, it kind of happened to Obama, right?
No.
I didn't drug strike.
So the difference is that one, that person is working with a foreign terrorist organization, right? FTO had the designation, number one. And number two, Obama was worried about breaking the law. So Obama literally went to his DOJ, the Office of Legal Counsel, and they had like a memo written up for whether or not they thought this was the authority of the president to do or not to do. And like he consulted his like legal professionals that were provided to him in the White House, and then they did the strike. Right?
Well, okay, to preface that, it is very important to note that the AUMF gives broad designation for what the president can designate as a terrorist organization and when it can respond with the military. The president's always had the capability, technically, to assassinate anyone in the country by designating them as terrorists because of the broad designation and the fact that it gives the president complete total control to deploy as many troops as he wants, wherever he wants. That's why we have troops in, like, I believe there's like all over the place in the Middle East that Congress wasn't even aware of. And like
for the authorization of middle.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, and it applies here, even in state, right? Like, the president's had that power before Congress.
I understand, and theoretically, like, I agree with that. I think we probably, to some extent, like, the president needs broad executive power to do that. But I'm saying, like, right now the Supreme Court has said that Donald Trump could personally just order an assassination of a guy that he doesn't like.
No, I'm saying that was already the case.
It wasn't the case.
That was the case.
Nobody. Then why did Obama go to the OLC, and was it Holder that wrote the memo? Why did he literally ask them for an analysis of whether or not he thought he had the justification to do a strike or not?
Because by the end of the day determined that he did have the justification to do the strike, which is what I'm highlighting. You have the justification as a president. If you deem someone a terrorist under the AUMF,
yes,
you can look at the wording specifically. So if Donald Trump or Joe Biden had designated like MAGA as a terrorist threat, he could technically deploy troops without Congress's permission and circumvent the legal system and kill.
Well, it wouldn't be circumventing, but we would have to know that he's doing it for that purpose and not just because he personally hates somebody.
I mean, he just has to designate Joe Biden like publicly as a, like it's that easy. AUMF's like it gives very broad justification.
Do you think that if the president right now were to designate, if he were to say, oh, I'm designating every single Democrat in Congress as a terrorist and kill them all prior to the stupid immunity ruling, do you think everybody else would, oh yeah, he has the legal authority to do that?
I mean, technically, yeah. The AUMF gives that broad of a jurisdiction. You can look at it. It's a very questionable.
I haven't read the text, but I'll bet you $20 right now that if I were to go and read that law, it has some type of characteristics for how you would define a foreign. It doesn't say anybody you want, LeMayo. It uses words like, who the president is trying to threat to the interests of the United States, or who the whatever intelligence services have delivered, like represents like a reasonable threat to
but
bullshit.
Yeah, it does have wording like that, but the problem is it's so broad that you technically
wrote
anyone.
When people say the wording is broad, it's a TV show term, it's broad. Usually when stuff seems broad, usually the legal terminology is used exists in like other bills or other statutes, or there's a common legal understanding for how it's used, and it's not just like used to randomly kill or do anything. Like that's not typically how it works. Like,
I mean, it was how we had so many troops like deployed in places that Congress was aware of. Like, it lets you circumvent like the ability to appeal. Like, it's like you're saying like, oh, well, you could just like appeal it.
But it doesn't limit the ability to do that because
that's what I'm saying. It's so open and
where does
like, the way it's worded.
Congress totally has oversight. You know how I know this? Because what are you talking about?
They didn't have oversight. You can look at the findings.
What is the authorization of use of military force? the bill from Congress.
Yeah, they gave the president the
So they
ability.
can take it away. They can pass more legislation to amend
And
it.
they probably should, but I'm saying.
Sure, but I'm just saying, it's weird to say that
What does that have to do with anything?
It's weird to say that Congress is oversight or can't change this when Congress could literally just change that bill if they wanted to, right?
When I say oversight, I'm referring to the fact that we had troops deployed in places that Congress was not aware of. They had to do a hearing on it when they
Sure.
found out this, and the hearing determined, oh, we have all these troops all over in all these different countries running different missions, and we have no fucking idea about it, and this is just the way the AUMF works. Like, it's very broad. The president has always had the ability to do it. And just because it's like,
I'm just saying they can change the law if they want, number one. Number two,
but like your question was that, like, to reround it back to your side, because we were go off on HG rants. The question mainly was like, doesn't it scare me that the president has the ability to like murder someone with impartiality?
sure,
Right.
And you're saying that they have broad use under this law because of the language. And I'm
They
saying
always,
that,
that's
like,
what I'm saying,
guess
the
it's
president's
just-
always had the capability to do that.
Yeah, the president's never used it to just like kill random U.S. citizens in the United States, except for.
Okay, but like,
Yeah, they didn't have
just
that.
because like someone doesn't use something, doesn't mean they don't have the capability under the like jurisdiction to do something.
Well,
You know,
that's
I mean,
one
like,
of the legal
that's-
things. That's kind of one of the things that we look at to see like what a common understanding. Like if you're going back and you're doing an analysis of some original law, you look to see how people acted around it at the time. It's like what do we think people's understanding of it was,
Yeah.
right? So and if the understanding, like you start doing a whole bunch of new shit with the law that no one's ever seen before, people are probably going to challenge on like was this like the intention of the law, and then you have like the whole Supreme Court battle over it. But so I guess like broadly, hold on, I'm sorry. So are you okay? Do you think the president of the United States can never commit a crime while he's president of the United States? Do you think it's a good reading, a fair reading, what the framers would have wanted? It's a fair way to evaluate the president.
You get into like tougher territories there because here's the problem. So number one, the framers intended that, and this is the way it was passed originally, the opposing party's leader would always be the vice president. That was overturned in the 12th Amendment. So originally the framers, in a situation where let's say this whole thing just happened January 6th and the voter thing, the president technically should have the opposing party as his VP, meaning that this wouldn't ever be like a conflict of interest. Now, of course, this was overturned, right, eventually, so now it became a major problem, right, because now you can have the same VP and the same party running. So when you have a situation like that, it becomes very clear to me that, like, the framers did intend this, it's just that we removed the check and balance on the fact that it would be a different opposing party that would always be the VP. And when you remove that,
It's not the VP can overrule the president on like a assassination or something, right?
well, I'm talking about in reference to, like, the,
President in charge of the crime.
yes, in charge of crime, when it comes to, like, the committees and stuff, right? So, like, when it comes to Electoral Count Act, right, we're talking about the president breaking a law there, right, that you say it's a law, but it was originally intended for the framers to be, like, the president was allowed to have these types of things, right? And, like, we whittle away at certain areas that create new issues of criminality that weren't determined to be criminal by the framers, is what I'm saying.
So the framers would have said the president of the United States could mug a man outside and he would be beyond criminal charges.
I mean, to some degree, yeah. I mean, just when you have to look at their rulings, right? When you have to look at their rulings and the way that they treated previous presidents, administrations, and
I'm
what they
saying
did.
that by drafting the Constitution, when we just had a rebellion against a king,
Yes.
and we're trying to create a federal government, and
Yes.
part of the creation of that federal government is a heavy restraint on the federal government's ability to do stuff, because the states were all worried about a stronger federal government emerging that would be tyrannical, that they would have, and they have one strong, fiery executive who is elected by the people and not the
Yeah.
Congress, that they would have thought that that man could be beyond criminal prosecution.
I mean, there's impeachment for that, right? That would be
No,
that would be
impeachment is very different. Impeachment is very different.
No.
And impeachment exists explicitly not for that.
Well, impeachment exists for the removal of the president when he's being, when he's basically derelict of duty, right? He's not following Congress's orders. I know, but there's like some more, like, you're like arguing in such a gray area, right? Because like technically breaking the Constitution isn't outright a
Before
law.
Trump, this wasn't a gray area to anybody. And even for you, I don't know how old you are, but like prior to Trump, if I would have asked you, do you think the president should be able to like commit a crime and get away with it and no criminal? You would immediately say, obviously not. Of course, that's really stupid. He would be the only person in the entire United States that has that kind of that immunity. Nobody has immunity from criminal prosecution. It's not a real, except for diplomats, I think sometimes.
Well, I mean, the issue there is when we're like arguing back and forth about this, right? If I did sit down and do the research, I would come to like a similar conclusion even about Trump's existence. That yeah, I mean, it looks historically like the president gets away with a lot of bullshit, and you can argue like, oh, well, it's not criminally charged. He never really got criminally charged. Well, I think it's horrendous, like morally, to like intern a bunch of people in concentration camps and like hold guns to their head and say, if you leave, we're going to shoot you.
It's like, it's morally cheating your partner. That doesn't mean a crime. It doesn't mean it's a criminally prosecutable thing.
Yeah, but this is like the weird area that like
It's not a weird area. Whatever it's clear area. Can you be charged with a crime if you're the president? I feel like the answer is obviously yes. Everybody's always operated that way, and we always have that assumption. I would feel really weird. Like, I could be wrong, but in the is it called a monarchical? Is it a monarchical republic where you have like the parliament,
like an aristocracy, and
you have the parliament and you have the king still, and the king like does the laws and everything? I could be wrong, but I think even at that time, I think the king could be charged with a crime. Like, I don't think the king was above criminal prosecution there. Could be wrong, but I think that even the king could be charged with crimes at the time America was started.
Yeah, but I think the issue is more during that time the king's more like a figurehead, like he's lost all power to some degree. It depends on which government you're talking about. Well, okay, it depends on which governments we're talking about. Like, we could really get nitty-gritty there, but let's not do that.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think it's crazy the idea that the United States of America, that had a revolutionary war against a king that we thought wasn't giving a good representation, that we have now granted the ability for the president of the United States to commit crimes to personally benefit himself, and we have somehow come to this understanding that he should be immune from our criminal prosecution. I don't think before Trump, I don't think anybody in the country would have ever signed off on that. But post-Trump, because of partisanship, I think some people have.
I mean, every single time we've proven that he can be civilly charged, right? So, like, there's plenty of cases of presidents being civilly charged. So FDR got civilly charged for an internment camps. He had to pay out reparations to the U.S. government. There's plenty of examples of like.
Wait a second. Is that true?
Yeah, we gave $20,000 to every single surviving.
We or do you have to take personally?
Well, the U.S. government.
Yeah,
right?
it's a way different thing. Because presidents can't be held civilly liable. That was the whole point of the Nixon v. Fitzgerald case that Roberts so ignorantly relied on because it had to do with civil matters and not criminal matters. But that case said that you can't sue the president because you lose your job. I think it was an FAA person or whatever.
Well, yeah, in that type of situation, we're talking about like civilly sued from like while you're in office, right? Like Donald Trump was civilly sued for his rape case on office, right? That happened, right? Like while he was in office, from my understanding, or at least the investigation.
Yeah, you can't sue the president while he's like in his role as president. Which makes sense. Like if the president does like fire some people from government, you can't sue him for you losing your job. Okay. But yeah,
I guess like the big issue I'm kind of pushing towards is like just historically it looks like the president gets away with a lot.
Not crimes.
Yeah, I know, but like when you're breaking the Constitution and we're saying
it's not a crime.
Like, I know, but it's not like a chargeable quote unquote offense.
That's what we're talking about. That's important.
It's a little difficult when like morally reprehensible things are being done but aren't quote unquote
There's different
crimes
procedures for addressing those things. If we think that there's a thing that we want to be stronger in the Constitution, right, we can pass different legislation, or we can change, we can amend the Constitution to change the thing. And so for criminal laws, we've got things that we as the public decide these are crimes, we have an interest in citizens not committing them, but now we're saying the president is beyond that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So like if we're due like accounting Congress having the right and responsibility to patch in these gaps, that's what the Democrats did after January 6th, right? They patched in the gap, that was an issue there. And like, what are we? I know it's tough to kind of budge on, but like, they did indeed like concede to some degree.
That doesn't
like,
mean it was legal. They conceded. All of Trump's people acknowledged that it was illegal.
Well,
we should try to touch on manufacturing a little bit before we move on from that.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I'm not trying to call it bad faith. I'm not. I'm trying to get like really into the nitty-gritty details because that's how I prefer to like run conversations a bit. I hope you don't think I'm coming off as bad.
No, I don't necessarily do. I just think if you want to get into the nitty-gritty detail, we're doing the immunity right now. The immunity rule is just crazy. I don't. Yeah. Okay.
It has its issues. I won't disagree with that. So manufacturing. I think it's really important to return manufacturing to the United States of America.
When you say return manufacturing, you're saying that
full capacity. I'm talking World War II.
Okay, well, because we manufacture more than we have in all of history of the United States. We want even more manufacturing in the US. So you say bring back, you mean bring back like base manufacturing or whatever?
Yeah, I mean like returning our factories back to the United States of America. So, for example, I would like to highlight in particular the troublesome areas for me personally are the pharmaceuticals that are mass manufactured over in China. We had who knows how many countless of people die because they couldn't basically acquire N95 masks. We couldn't acquire ventilators because a lot of that stuff is manufactured and produced in China, and they are going to pressure and prefer their own country over the United States of America. And who knows how many countless people died because of that. That is not good, and that's because of the liberal global like trade system that we have set up, where like everyone's supposed to quote unquote benefit from each other. But that's not really how it works, because when pandemics happen, when wars happen, people clamp down on resources. We have this with Russia and Europe. There's this whole issue where Russia is like literally like Europe doesn't want to jump into anything with supplying nuclear weapons because of the whole Russian gas line, right? All these other issues, right? So the reason I bring this up in manufacturing is that returning the manufacturing to the United States, which Trump's doing through the tariffs, ultimately secures more protection around our pharmaceutical industry, around things that we need when things go to shit. Here's
Okay, so can I ask a couple of basic questions? Do you think that if we bring, when I say, when I talk about productivity as a term in economics, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think it would be good if I said for us to bring back manufacturing jobs, we would necessarily be bleeding off higher productivity jobs to other countries in the world in favor of lower productivity jobs in the United States of America? Do you think that'd be a worthy trade?
Yes and no, because an important thing to note is the fact that if we do bring back manufacturing factories here, the majority of it's going to be automated, right? Like, we can't deny that. And with automation coming through, when you bring back a lot of our manufacturing hub here, we can produce a lot of things for dirt cheap rates that compete with Chinese slave labor, right? Like, compete with these like pennies that people are making for like $10.
So we can't compete, right? Because if we were, we would already be doing it. We wouldn't need exorbitant tariffs to do it, right?
Well, I mean, here's the problem. You can't deny that, well, you've said this many times, I agree with you to some degree. The U.S. has greatly benefited from the current global trade economy, right?
Yeah.
Like, we gain a lot of surplus in our economy. We have very strong value in our currency. The problem is we're so intertwined with all these other countries that when we do start pulling ourselves away over concerns of manufacturing like pharmaceuticals, which I think you agree with me, it's probably not good that if we have a pandemic in the United States, that China can just clamp down on the pharmaceutical product, either to A, screw us over because they can, or B, if they don't have any malicious intent for their own people. That is a very dangerous situation to present, and when we're so entwined with China, it becomes very difficult because I don't see a way we can really distance ourselves from them because everyone has their own business interests, right? You talk about this a lot.
Sure. So I'm curious, are you American or Canadian?
Right.
Okay. I only asked this because I only learned this in like a year or two ago. I didn't know this. Yeah. In Canada, how many Canadians in the house tonight? Woo! Yeah, it's not that far, right? The provinces can set a lot of their own trade, like intra-state, inside the country.
We do some of that here too.
No, absolutely don't.
Not at all. We don't have any ability for states to conduct interstate commerce.
No, they have to. Everything has to be reciprocated. Like a state couldn't make its own currency. I don't think like a state like California could say,
I misunderstood what you're talking about.
Okay, sure. They can like
your currencies, that's
well, not just currency, but like I don't think California we don't ship to Arkansas, or we have preferential trade deals with New York.
Yes, that was established. But like I just thought you meant trade in general. I was like, no, they can like trade between states like that.
Oh, they can trade, yeah. But I think in Canada, like I think like a province could say, we're going to have a different trade relationship with Alberta than we have with Calgary or Finland or whatever these big fucking places are, right? They have the ability to do that. Do you think in the United States, do you think that we should allow the states to be able to conduct their own trade relationships with each other? Like should California be able to get preferential trade to New York and bar like Louisiana, Georgia, Alabama if they wanted to?
You get into really dangerous territory for like laws like that when it comes to like preferential treatment between states, because then you can have purposely like beneficial states. Let's say New York, for whatever reason, West Virginia. It's never going to happen. But let's say they have an economic boom and they like start seceding ahead, and then other states around them, because they don't want people to leave from their state to contribute to that economy or any numerous reasons, they could very easily gang up and like cripple that state by not like supplying with certain things. So that would be a very big issue. So I kind of agree with that, like them having full freedom like that.
Sure, okay, so walk me through this, because I would agree with exactly what you would say, but then I would just extend that one level, and I would say, I feel like countries all being self-interested in a really hardcore way would be really negative, because now if anything hits, all of these guys could be working together, they're going to try to fuck over the United States, they're not going to send us their best and brightest students, the best and brightest engineers, they're going to hoard all of that for themselves, and they're all going to fuck the U.S. over the next natural disaster or world pandemic or whatever, because they know that the U.S. is like self-interested in that way.
But this my issues, they already did this, right? China has shown that they literally hoarded.
So the reason why we didn't have all those N95 and not insulators, not ventilators, is because they had leadership to think that it was a serious problem and try to get this stuff ahead of time.
Well, for the record, he did to some degree, at least at the beginning of his administration, to get a serious problem. Otherwise, he wouldn't have thrown trillions of dollars behind Operation Warp Speed. So clearly, he thought
that
was a bad problem.
I know, but But I'm saying that Donald Trump, as soon as the
you
WA
may think it was a problem, not probably for the American people, it's kind of selfish,
Sure,
but
but I'm
it's
saying,
economy,
I'm saying that as soon as the United States started to take shit seriously, we got the shit we needed, right? Like, I think the United States can spend on manufacturing for a lot of stuff that we need to, depending on the thing, but for N95s, in the United States, I feel like we must be able to do that, right?
Yeah, but like we do lack a lot of those facilities to be able to produce these things, right? And like the issue is like when we're relying on China for a lot of this like type of stuff, it becomes an issue when we come with supply. And yes, the US can amount to that, but we shouldn't have that delay of response and that issue. Even if it's like, let's say, oh, like we're able to rebuild and like scale up our factories to produce N95s in a month.
Sure.
There should have never been that month in the first place taken too, because those people are dying. Our citizens are dying. Our people are dying
So,
too.
like, I think,
like you get what I'm saying? Like
I
it
understand
shouldn't be
what you're saying, and I
for
think
key
that,
industries. Let me say this for key industries. I don't think we should be making 10 new shops. I mean, socks like that. That's ridiculous.
okay, well, okay, so if that's the position you're taking, I would say that you completely abandoned Trump's position, and that's more or less, that could be my position. If somebody wants to say there are certain types of industries that we should protect, like stuff related to agriculture, like food, animal ag, stuff related to defense, that we should have some protection on those industries, because it would be pretty silly if we imported 100% of our jet fuel or rocket fuel from China, if that's like our next big military component. Then I would say, like, yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
there's examples like that.
Yeah, but that's not bringing back manufacturing in any capacity to like go back to the glory days. That's just saying that we should be protectionist around some national defense industries. That I think makes sense, but that's, you recognize that's a total departure from Trump's.
Well, I wanted to further expand on that position. I think it's important even to return all types of manufacturing to the United States, right? Because with certain advents in automation and the way automation has progressed so much, like it's becoming easier and easier for machines to take on tasks of humans. So it's easier and easier for the United States to produce goods and compete with China as a manufacturing power, right? Which is important because what won us World War I and World War II? It was the fact that the United States could shift over consumer industries into production of military products, right? We're looking at the Ukraine war right now. Why do they not have shells? Why are they struggling? Why do we have to sell so much of our old stockpile instead of our new one? Well, A, you could look at the obvious reason, which is the fact that like we don't give them our new toys. But
Sure,
B,
but
like we need to be able to rapidly reproduce our like equipment and stuff. Like
That's
we don't
true.
have to pass
Yes, but how did we win World War II against Japan?
by literally shifting over our manufacturing facilities for consumer goods to military.
Okay, well, what was the thing that ended
We went
the
to
war?
total war.
What happened twice? With what?
Oh well, the bombs. But
That's a
for the record, that's not why.
True, but that was a stated reason. It was probably it played into the fear factor of the world. Okay, it was probably a good thing.
For
But
the
like,
record, the Japanese generals and the king, not the king, the
Emperor.
the emperor, literally said they could nuke us 4 to 5 more times and we wouldn't care. Like the government was so bad.
I understand this. They were worried about the Soviet.
I'm just saying, like,
they were
it's-
worried about the Russians. Were
I feel like you're gonna argue that our specialized industries were like what helped us win the war.
I think our specialized industries are really important. Yes.
Yes, I'm not denying that they weren't
But
important.
I don't think that we can have it all. I think that sometimes, like, I make fun of socialists and uber progressives when they think that we could have free healthcare with the same level of access and the same level of benefits for every single person. There's no resource strain. And conservatives make fun of them too for saying that. But then when we talk about manufacturing, we think that we could magically manufacture every single thing in the world that we import from every other country in the world, that we replace the entire world's working population with automated factories. And my question is, realistically, what do you think we have to give up to do that? Do you think we can do that at no cost?
I mean, to some degree.
To some degree, we can do that at no cost.
To some degree. I will say,
Fantastic delusion.
I'm not saying like I think we can go full autocracy. There's some things.
No,
I'm
you're
not
saying
saying
like
like
95%?
No, well, a certain percentage. Obviously, that's what I'm advocating for, and that's what I believe like the overall administration's position is that they should be pushing more towards more and more of our stuff being produced here. And when you're so entwined with other countries and business ventures, right? Let's say the majority of our manufacturers over in China are American capitalists, right? They benefit directly from that trade. They're not going to agree with the fact when Donald Trump says, hey, we want to return manufacturing to the States. They're going to look at him like he's crazy because they're economically benefiting from it. The only way to really pull out the rug from a system like that is to mass tariff all these other countries to cause harm on businesses, to force them to rebuild manufacturing.
So that's a chain of logic that I would say breaks at every single link. Okay, I understand the argument, but I think it breaks almost at every single link.
In what way?
In all ways. But so, like my general overarching question, or my general overarching thing looking at this, right? And then we can go anywhere you want. But like in the entire world, every other person wants to be the U.S. economy.
Yes.
Everybody will be one of the highest productivity workforces in the world. We have some of the highest technological capabilities of anybody in the world. We have some of the highest, like, in terms of research and development. Like, everybody, like, China is not saying, like, oh my God, I wish we could have even more manufacturing, right? China that is saying like we're stealing all of your intellectual property because we want to make the shit that you make, right? Some countries have gotten trapped in like the manufacturing, like sinkhole, like Germany has had issues of like trying to escape this, right? And then when you look at like what's available in the U.S. in terms of like say our educational institutions that also like add on a lot of productive works, like everybody in the world comes to the United States for this. Here's the problem. So, which obviously my question is like, so the U.S. has like one of the highest productivity workforces. We use the highest tech and everything, and we import all of our like manufactured stuff from other people. So much so that like lefties in the U.S. and all the other countries are like, fuck you guys, you're taking advantage of us when you do this. In what world where the U.S. is like obliterating everybody economically, technologically, intellectually, in terms of like the students and everything else, that we're looking at them like, God, fuck, these guys are taking advantage. I want to be more like them. Like, what, if you can name one other country we should be more like who are we even looking at?
I mean, it's tough because America charts its own course, which is something I strongly believe. So
America does its own what?
America charts its own course, like historically. Like we've always been different from every other country in the world. I strongly believe that. Right? I'm very patriotic. Conservative.
But we don't just chart the we lead, right? Like people want to be more like us in a lot of ways.
Yeah, because of the directions we take, and when we look at the state of the world right
so
now.
then why do we go backwards?
Well, because you have to look at the critical issues that we're facing around the world. We can't properly supply Ukraine. Why? Because we don't have the capability we used to during
No,
World
that's
War
not
II.
true. We can't properly supply Ukraine now because we don't have the capability to do so.
I mean, to some degree, yes and no, because under the Joe Biden administration, we struggled to supply them with shells. Europe struggled to supply them. We did not have, I mean, it's just the truth though, we did not have the manufacturing, and we probably still don't have the manufacturing capacity to supply a war. And then if you look at what's happening in Israel too, it split our manufacturing even harder. And that's because we have such a weak manufacturing base here.
So the manufacturing in the US has been
allies.
higher than it's ever been. Our output has been higher than it's been in all of years' history, number one.
Yeah, but not
Number
when it
two,
comes to conventional.
yeah, because we don't have the political will for it. But if we wanted to.
But we did under the Biden
No, we
administration.
didn't. We literally had to fight under whether or not the immigration bill was going to be tied to the Ukraine funding, and all the Republicans decided they hated Ukraine because Donald Trump said it. Like we absolutely were still divided under Biden on how we were going to support Ukraine.
Okay.
We never had like the combined political will to say like this is a project that we're going to invest in. We're going to start like manufacturing in this direction. We're going to have
But we couldn't because we don't have the facilities here, just as I'm highlighting. You can't say that, oh, well, we could have just, bound together, like we did have the political will behind it. You can't have political will. It takes 5 to 10 years, which is, one of the issues with a lot of economists have said, well, Trump's
Even if we
terrifying.
would assume that it would take that long to make sure, let's assume that what you're saying is true, which, by the way, we wouldn't have to be the ones to make them. We could get our allies from your friends in the world. We could even make them, right? And then, be a part of that supply chain or just, commanding that or subsidizing it or whatever. Because we had friends all over the world that could also make stuff as well, so they were part of our, in a way, connected economy as well. But let's say that it's like, oh God, it's 5 to 10 years where we can make shells for Ukraine. How many generations would it take to manufacture every single thing that we're importing then? Because that sounds like that would be like a multi-generational project to even approach all of the imports we get from everybody else around the world.
Are you talking about military-wise? Or
Everything-wise, what Trump wants to do, what you're advocating for.
I mean, when you think about the economic benefit of let's assume robotics continues on the path it's going, AI is continuing on the path, automation is incredibly beneficial. If we're able to massively just output things as cheap as possible to other countries without having to sacrifice human capital, which is incredibly important when it comes to building your next military development, right? That is incredibly beneficial to the United States because now Europe, our ally, doesn't have to rely on China for manufacturing their goods. Any of our allies, India, does not have to rely on China for manufacturing their products. They can come to the United States for manufacturing, and we get to strengthen and consolidate our power around our other nations, which is the benefit of returning our manufacturing.
We don't have the ability to manufacture our stuff.
That's what I'm saying. That's what we have to return. That's why the tariffs force our factories overseas. Right?
So why don't we do it now?
What do you mean?
Why don't companies just make it now or start making the factories to do it now without the tariffs? Why wouldn't they have done it before?
Because they directly benefit from the financial returns that they're getting from having their factories over on cheap production there, and there's no incentives right now for the government. If I'm a factory owner in China, I'm producing tons of goods. There's no fucking incentive for me to just pack up my entire shop, move it over to the States. That's fucking insane, right?
Because it would be way more expensive.
Yes, but that's because there's already buy-in to the Chinese government, right?
And it's cheaper.
Yeah, but when you're hosting our manufacturing hubs in a foreign country that's adversarial to us and is literally planning invasions to our ally that could potentially drag us into a war like Taiwan, that is miserable and horrible for the future of.
Doesn't it give us more leverage to negotiate a non-violent confrontation? Wouldn't China be worried about losing all of the U.S. foreign direct investment and everything else?
No, because last time this happened, because they are a different government, they're not a free trade government. they just clamped down on any of their billionaires that tried to leave the country and flee the United States. We saw multiple of them disappear. All their
No, but I'm saying,
like they froze
would
American assets,
But they would
and companies.
They would lose the foreign direct investment from the U.S. And if we have strong allies too. Also, we don't have to just import from China. Other people can make stuff for us as well.
Yeah, I mean, I do think India is on the way to start producing things, but like I'm saying, I think it would be good for the United States to return like their manufacturing base because we want to be able to also, like during World War II and World War I, be able to rapidly convert these factories to wartime economies. The reason why the United States won the war in World War II wasn't because of the fact that we produced the best tanks. Our tanks were dog shit. But for every 1 to 2 Panzers, there's 10 more American A-1 tanks pulling up. You can't win a war when you can outproduce your enemy. And that's what happened time and time again during World War II and World War I.
The reason
and
why
our
our
allies
though is because we also weren't like in a war-torn Europe and we were basically untouched and we were able to deploy our entire population towards like
Yeah,
manufacturing.
and that war-torn Europe, like when Britain's industries were destroyed by Luftwaffe bombing 24/7, who was sending the tanks over? Who had the mass supply of tanks that were able to produce?
Sure,
Yeah,
but
because of
I'm
our
saying-
manufacturing.
Yeah.
Like this is the thing, right? Like we need our
I
manufacturing
understand what
hub
you're
here.
saying, but are you willing, like here's the issue, I'm gonna repeat this.
Okay.
Are you willing to pay the economic cost in doing so? Because you seem to think that we could bring all of our manufacturing back here and more or less the standard will likely be the same. You need to understand that if we were to bring it all here, I'm not gonna say it's impossible, we could do it,
Yeah.
but it's gonna come at a substantial cost to our standard of living. Everything is gonna be more expensive, cars are gonna be 2x, 3x more the cost, houses are gonna be more expensive,
Well, why would it be more expensive?